Hi folks, and welcome to this session. I'm Ian Davis from Aylesbury Therapy for Kids, obviously based in Aylesbury, where I conduct one-to-ones, workshops. I work in a school in Reading, sometimes a school in Milton Keynes. I conduct something like 500 or 600 sessions in the course of a year, so I get to see an awful lot of children. Lucky me, eh? So in terms of what's happening tonight, we're discussing setting ground rules and discipline, which is a great one. That's good news. We'll be recording the session as of now, and this session will then appear on YouTube, which is where you can find all the previous and all the future sessions of this run. If you're not sure where the YouTube videos are, send a query and I'll send you a link so that you can find them directly. So setting ground rules and discipline. Well, what do I mean by setting ground rules and discipline? Discipline bit we'll do at the end, but the setting of the ground rules, well, ground rules are important because if you don't have any ground rules, then you're going to have an unruly house. We need ground rules. They are a list of expectations, really, that apply to everybody. That might need explaining. If you've got a real youngster, so a 4, 5, 6-year-old, they're not going to know what ground rules means. They might not even know what rules means, might not know what boundaries mean. But essentially, we are setting boundaries that we want the children to operate within. So it's a little bit like a farmer having sheep. When he puts his sheep in a field, he puts a fence around it so that he keeps them enclosed. That's the boundary, it's the fence. And that fence is intended to both keep them safe, but also to enable you to keep an eye on them and to see what they're doing. Quite a nice way of explaining it to a real youngster. And they need to be able to not break those boundaries, break those fences, so that you know that they're behaving in the right way. There's no point putting a fence, boundaries, around those sheep if they're going to keep on crashing into them and bursting through them and going eating all the grass in the wrong field, because that's not what a boundary is for. So a boundary is to keep them enclosed in the field, keep them safe, and it really gives you the opportunity of putting those boundaries in place to ensure that things happen the way you want them to happen. So let's just talk a little bit about what ground rules are. So why do we want ground rules? What's the purpose of them? Well, they create harmony. They allow us to settle arguments quickly and easily, because if somebody breaks a ground rule, breaks a boundary, we know that that's been set and agreed, and therefore we know that it's been broken. And later we'll agree some consequences of breaking those boundaries, breaking those rules. What would happen if that sheep kept on breaking that fence and running into the cow field? So they also create better communication between you and your children. They get to know all the things that you like, the things that you allow, the things that you encourage. They'll get to know the things that you don't like, swearing perhaps, throwing stones at the next door neighbour's dog perhaps, etc., etc. So they'll get to know that they can't do those things. Equally, they'll get to know the things that they can do. It's having that reference point to settle arguments. So if Tommy comes to you and says, Billy's been throwing stones at the dog next door, well, Tommy's expecting to get told off because he knows that he shouldn't be doing that. Everybody knows what's important in the household because of boundaries. So we know, for example, perhaps that talking the right way is properly. Having manners is part of what we do. Part of having manners is one of those boundaries, perhaps. So talking to people the right way and having manners is something that we do naturally because it's a boundary that we have. So everybody knows what's important. And this also helps to instill the traits that you want in your children. If you set these boundaries the right way, you set these ground rules the right way, it allows you to pass on your values. So if for you, swearing not an issue, fine, that's not going to be one of your boundaries. But if swearing is an issue, then you need to follow that as well. It's no good you effing and jeffing all the way to school if they're not allowed to swear. If they're not allowed to swear, you can't swear, because that would show them that those boundaries are then a choice. And you don't want them to think that those ground rules, those boundaries, those rules are a choice, because they're not. Breaking those rules and boundaries creates a consequence, and that consequence for them isn't great news. So they're not going to want to do that. You can also get others to monitor their behaviour by those same standards, by sharing those rules. So if your child is looked after by parents at the weekend, they need to know what the rules are. They need to know what the standards are. If perhaps you're visiting some family friends, you're going to just want to perhaps to touch base with them and check that their children have similar boundaries, similar rules. Otherwise, you could end up in quite a sticky situation where your child perhaps throws stones at their next door neighbour's dog, and their child goes, "Oh my goodness, what are you doing? That's a broken rule." So it's a good idea just to touch base with any friends you have when you're visiting with children, to make sure that their boundaries are not entirely dissimilar to yours. So if your children can't swear, their children can't swear, happy days, no one swears. But if your child can and their child can't, not a great recipe. Yeah. It also allows children to feel valued, because if they know they're working within the boundaries and they're getting praise for that, which obviously they should do, then they feel more comfortable with that. And kids love structure. They love to know that if they do this, this happens, and if they do that, that happens. Kids love that. And so very much having ground rules is an essential part of being a parent. Where that can sometimes be a bit problematic is if your child is going to another parent various times in the week, and they have different ground rules. So they have ground rules, sure, but they're different, and they're markedly different. So for example, let us say you're very strict with your child in terms of how much computer time they have. They have 2 hours a day. You're on it like a thing, and every time they like go to a minute over, you're there. But at Dad's house, they can do what they want. Dad actually encourages them to play the computer, because it means he doesn't have to do anything with them, which for him is a real benefit. So that can be a real problem, because your son's going to come home and go, "Oh, I can't play the computer," because he's been playing the computer all weekend. And you've just told him he's nearing his 2-hour limit, he's got to come off. That's going to be a cause for disagreement and an argument. So where possible, where you've got that situation, you want to try and talk to that ex-partner and try and agree that you have the same ground rules. That may mean extending yours a little bit, may mean them cutting theirs back a little bit, but try and find that middle ground so as not to confuse your youngster, because that's not great for them. You then get the situation where they say, "Oh, I want to go and live at Dad's," because they can play the computer there all day long. Yeah, and that's not really what you want. So try and find that middle ground. I know it's not easy. I know where you've got an ex and that is the case, then that can be quite a difficult, awkward conversation to have. But if you can have that conversation, do, and try and find that middle ground. Even if you've got to compromise a bit, it's still worthwhile. So how do we go about setting ground rules? They're only effective when they're realistic. They need to be achievable. They need to be things that the kids aren't going to get stuck on. So if you're going to say to them, "You've got to complete your homework every day the minute you get home from school," that might not be a great ground rule, because a lot of kids will like to go and play with their mates for a bit, might want to go on the computer for a bit, might want to go and have a snack, a bath, maybe they want to get changed. So there's going to be various things that they may want to do before they get stuck into their homework. So perhaps you can say, "Look, 4 o'clock is homework time, you're home at 3:15. Okay, that's fine. Maybe it's, I don't mind when you get your homework done, so long as it's done before dinner, and dinner's always at 6 o'clock. Okay, that's given them some responsibility and freedom. But with that one, what happens when it gets to 5:30 and they've got an hour's homework to do and they haven't started it yet? Maybe you want to be a bit more specific. So maybe you'd want to say to them, it's got to get done before we start dinner, or you can't have any dinner. Not great, not what most of us would want to do. So maybe we are a bit more strict on that and say, well, fine, you've got to start your homework by 4:30 or by 5 o'clock, so that there's enough time for them to get it done. So make sure that those ground rules are realistic, make sure they're achievable, and make sure they're ones that can get stuck to. So you don't want ones that are too easy to break. They need to be supported by reasonable consequences, and we'll talk a lot more about consequences later. So talk them through those ground rules, and ideally you want to be having the conversation with them, and ideally you don't want to have too many ground rules, because too many ground rules and you're just going to confuse the hell out of them. Yep. So if this is the first time that you're setting boundaries, you're setting ground rules, then perhaps start with 3. Okay, let's find 3 most important things, the 3 things that you really want to happen, and get those in place and get them working. And when they're done, fine, move on and add in some more ground rules. Yeah. We can all remember 3 things. So setting 3 as an initial target is actually quite a good idea. If you have an older, more mature child, then you can have a more open conversation about, okay, fine, right, we're now going to sit down and talk about some ground rules because, and you explain the benefits of having those ground rules, explain why it's important to you to have those ground rules, and actually have a fairly open conversation about what those ground rules should be. And you could then also agree what are the consequences of not doing those things. So when you're doing those ground rules, remember, you hold all the aces, you're the parent, you're the adult, so whatever you say goes. So be prepared to give some ground on the things that you don't care that much about. Yeah. So if Florence doesn't have her shower at 6 o'clock and it's 6:30, does that really matter? Is that really a problem? Okay, fine. If it is, then it's what you say it is, that ground rule. But if you're not that fast, then fine. Let her win that argument and perhaps not have that ground rule or adjust that ground rule. Because the more they feel involved in setting these ground rules, the more they're going to buy into them. The more they're going to say, yeah, well, I agree to that. I better do it, really, didn't I? Yeah. I said I wouldn't play the computer more than 2 hours, and I need to be getting off. Yeah. Because if they've agreed them, if they've already said, yeah, fine, I'll do that, then they're going to agree and they're going to be more likely to comply. So get them involved. Make the rules as short as possible. You don't want to be writing a paragraph about a ground rule. Yeah. The ground rule is you're up at 7 o'clock in the morning, because if you're not up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you'll miss the bus. So the ground rule is you get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Or the ground rule is you go to bed at 7:30. Finished. Doesn't need to have anything else to it at all. That's the rule. You need to go to bed at 7:30. Done. Set. Agreed. Yeah. So check each rule is reasonable. Check that the child feels it's reasonable, and really just build on those from there. You don't want to make rules that they can't follow. And you certainly don't want to make rules that you can't follow. So if, for example, you say, there's no swearing. Yeah, we can't say this word, we can't say that word, and we can't say that word. No swearing. and you've got your ground rules done, and you're now off in the car. You're on your way to Tesco's with your sweet little Jimmy in the back of the car, and a car cuts you up, and immediately you start and going off on one, swearing your heart out at this car who's just cut you up. That kind of says that swearing is a two-way street, and it's okay for you, but it's not okay for them, which really isn't where you want to be. So you need to be making sure that if you're setting rules for children, that you can also set those rules.
That's why we can't visit.
Agree what happens to those rules. Are you going to write out a great big list? Are you going to stick them on the bedroom door, the cloakroom door, the fridge, the ceiling? Where are you going to put them? Are they going to be on display to other people that come to your house? Because that may provoke questions. You may be quite happy with that. You may not be, entirely up to you. But just think where you're going to put them. Are you going to have a full list, or are you going to have just a reminder list? So quite a good idea is when you've written your ground rules, let's say you end up 9 of them, is choosing the 3 most important ones, and those are the ones you post up wherever you want them to be. That's quite a good way of doing that.
I can't hear you.
So be sure that the rule can be obeyed by everybody, and make it clear who that rule applies to if it doesn't apply to everybody. So if, for example, getting up at 7:30 is a rule for your child, do you want that to be a rule for everybody else in the house? Probably not. So you just make it clear that that's their rule, not for everybody. When the rule is broken, that's when you move on to consequences.
You get hot.
Before we do that, let's just talk a moment about being consistent. So your attitude to those rules needs to be consistent.
And I just want a hug. No, but a hug.
Let me just turn someone's microphone off. There we go, done. So a child that's given mixed messages around rules can become quite anxious. They'll push harder against the rules that they don't like. They'll see if they can change the consequence to breaking that rule. So be sure that you're giving consistent guidelines on those boundaries. If they break the boundary today, they get X. If they break it tomorrow, they don't want to get B. It needs to be X again. And if they break it on Saturday, yeah, it needs to be X again. Otherwise, they'll be looking at those consequences and thinking, yeah, actually, there's a movement here. I could make this work. Yeah. There's a lad I was working with earlier today, actually, who's a very good lad. But he plays his computer forever, many hours in the course of a day. And he's allowed to do that by his father when he goes there. And mum is having a real struggle trying to get him to not play the computer so much in their house. So they've attempted to sit down and agree these ground rules with their son. And that conversation did not go well because he can do whatever he wants and his dad doesn't have any rules. So sometimes you just have to say, oh, is there a compromise to be had here? You know, instead of it coming off at this time, maybe you come off at this time. Instead of the consequence being pretty dramatic, maybe we could lessen the drama and reduce it. Just think about what you're doing and do it carefully. But once that ground rule is broken, once it's been agreed and then it gets broken, do be consistent with the consequence. The consequence always needs to be the same. There are no in-betweens. You're either consistent or you're not. And I know that's something that some of you find difficult. I was talking to Mum earlier this week, who is rubbish at setting ground rules, and is even worse at applying the consequences. So I'll be doing some work with her in the next few weeks with regards to helping her deal with that, because you need to set the ground rules and be consistent with your application of them, because if you're not, it's a recipe for disaster. You end up with an anxious child, an unruly child, a disrespectful child, and that's not what you want. So even when you're knackered, you're tired, you're overworked, you're starving, waiting for your dinner, and you just can't be bothered, you need your sleep, you still need to be consistent. And being consistent takes time, takes effort. But if you don't, you're making that rod for your own back. Don't forget to praise your child's good behaviour, catch them being good, to avoid them learning to attract your attention by being bad. I say bad, that's not a great word, is it? But you know what I mean. So if they learn that the only way to get your attention is by breaking those rules and getting landed with a consequence, that's what they'll do, because children crave attention, as we all do. They're no different to us. So they will seek attention if they're not receiving it. So give them attention for the good behaviour and play down the poor behaviour. So I was again talking to someone earlier today, and they were having that very same conversation. We were having a three-way conversation, including their child, and he made exactly that point. He said, "Yeah," he said, "I love getting told I've done something well." He said, I don't like getting told I've done something wrong, even if there's not a consequence for it." He said, "I still don't like it." So just remember that I like the praise. Great, thanks ever so much for taking those bins out. That's really good. Didn't cost you anything, did it? No, you can make that comment in seconds, doesn't cost you anything. You can do it from the comfort of your seat while you've got a glass of wine in your hand. It's not a problem. Yeah, easy enough to do. Sort out the issues together. So when a rule, a boundary gets broken, don't just necessarily put it all on the child. So let us say you have two boys, they're playing rough. You've told them not to play rough, but they end up knocking your vase over. And your vase that your mum left for you, and she's now passed away, has been broken, and you're heartbroken. So you can choose how to respond to that. So if you choose to respond emotionally, they probably won't get it. They probably won't get why you've gone off on one, because they won't be aware of the sentimental value that vase had for you until you explain it to them. So far better to say, look, I asked you not to play. I asked you not to do this. You continue to do it. You've now knocked the vase over and broken it, something that's very precious to me, and it needs to be cleared up. So I'm going to come and help you, and you're going to help me clear it up. You then clear it up, and perhaps you deliver a consequence, depends on what boundaries you set. You deliver the consequence, and that's that, finished. So you focus on the event, not the child. You don't say, you blithering idiot, blah, 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 because that's going to impact that child far more. So focus on the event and what has happened and the resolution to it, instead of focusing on the child. If you focus on the child, that's not going to work out too well for them. You'll end up with issues for that child. Yeah. So focus on the event. And if you can, help them find a solution to that. Kids at any age need to learn problem-solving skills, and very often those are practical skills. So helping a child clear up a mess that they've created by being badly behaved is a good way of helping them to learn, actually, yes, you screwed up, but we can fix it. You'll still have to face the consequence, but we can still fix it. We can fix it together. Not doing that with your child would encourage them to then tell you lies. So you're not present in the room where this vase lives. They're creating sweet merry hell. They break the vase. They're not going to tell you, are they? Because they don't want to be called for everything once they've told you. So they're going to sweep it under the carpet, perhaps, maybe literally. If your carpet is crunching as you walk in, you'll know what's happened to the vase. So don't attack the child, attack the event, and deal with that. So another thing you can do with your child, which encourages growth within your child, development within your child, is to do stuff together. So do chores together, make the beds together, do the washing up together, fill the dishwasher together, cook the dinner, serve the dinner, clear the table together. Because that teaches them that they are part of a family, and that family does stuff together, and they look after one another, and they have each other's back. Because anything that you do, they do, and they'll just get a much better feeling of belonging by being involved in those chores. They'll get to learn those skills, and life will just be better. Yeah. So imagine your child at 16 wants to go and join the army, and they join the army. Do you know what the first thing is they teach you in the army? No, it's not a beat boots on. No, the first thing you get taught in the army is how to make a bed. First thing. Yep. And why do they do that? They do that so that you have to make your bed as soon as you get out of it and before you go for breakfast. And you have to do that in a particular way. And the reason they do that is so that you can achieve something even before you've had your breakfast. So you start your day with an achievement, a well-made, properly made bed that will even pass inspection by the officers in your guard room. Yeah. So that's the first thing you learn in the army. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about consequences. So we've had our sit-down conversation. We've talked about the ground rules, why we should have them, how we're going to make them. We've agreed them. And now we're going to talk about the consequences, because you can't have ground rules without consequences. Because if you have all these ground rules in, I don't matter if you break them, yeah, crack on, no worries. Yeah. Well, that's exactly what will happen. They'll get broken all the time. So you need to have consequences agreed for what happens when when a boundary is broken. This is, depending on the age of your child, the competence of your child, this is best done, again, involving your child. Because if they agree what the consequence is and they break a boundary, they know what's going to happen. They know because they've already agreed to it. They might even have had the idea. So homework not done, 6 o'clock, lose your iPad. Okay, fine. Not lose my iPad. No, maybe I'll just get that maths done. Yeah, I think I'll get my maths done. Yeah, don't want to lose my iPad. And it gets done. Happy days. They are late out at night, and you've told them to be home at 7 o'clock, and it's 6:30, and they're playing a game of football. They're really enjoying it, and it's half time, and they're changing ends, and they're thinking, it's going to take me 5 minutes to get home. I can't stay here for the whole football match. Well, maybe I could. But then I lose my phone. Okay, I'm going to tell them I've got to go. Yeah, I'm going to go. Yep. So if they understand what that consequence is already and they agreed to it, then you're halfway there, because they're going to be managing themselves. They're going to monitor themselves. The older the child, the easier that is to do. A 5-year-old is probably not going to be able to tell the time. I won't know it's time to come home anyway. And they're not going to be out on their own, are they? Yeah. So depending on the age of the child, do what is appropriate. I talk to mums that when we talk about consequences, I can see them kind of glaze over. I can see them start to just go cold. And we get to talk about it, and their attitude will tend to be, I just want my kids to have fun. I don't want to have to punish them for doing stuff. I get that, but that means they'll be doing stuff. So how are you going to stop them doing that stuff that they shouldn't be doing? If you've got a secret answer, then do let me know, because I don't know of one other than there being a consequence for doing stuff they're not meant to do. There has to be a consequence. Yeah? It can be a lightweight consequence, but there has to be a consequence. So avoid idle threats. Don't say, you're going to go to bed early tonight, and then let them up to watch whatever it is they want to watch on TV. No, because that takes all the strength, all the power out of that consequence. If they're going to bed early tonight, tell them what time they're going to bed, remind them of that 15 minutes before, 5 minutes before, and then they're off to bed. And if they kick off, then they stand the chance of losing something else. So you want to lose your iPad? Fine. Now you've lost your iPad. You've still not gone to bed? Okay, fine. So do you not want to go to your nan's this weekend? You do. Then you need to be going to bed. Good night, son. Yeah. So those consequences can be ramped up. They need to be pre-agreed, but they can certainly be ramped up. So you may end up with 3 consequences or more for the same offence, particularly if they're ignoring the first or second or third consequence. And each time that consequence gets ramped up. Yeah. Okay. My rule with regards to consequences is you tell them twice, that's it, consequence. So, Jimmy, put your shoes on. Jimmy, put your shoes on because we're running late for school. We don't want to be late for school. Get your shoes on or you're going to lose your electronics. Still no sign of effort to put those shoes on. Then, look, I'm sorry, you've lost your electronics. Yeah, put them in and say sorry, actually. But yes, you've lost those electronics. Now, would you like some help with those shoes? You seem to be struggling. Let me help you. Yeah. You might not be able to help them. You may be tied up because you have another child on another hand, and therefore, no, you can't help them. They have to sort it out themselves, and they can sort it out themselves, and they will. So tell them what to do. Tell them a second time and remind them of the consequence of non-compliance with what it is that you've asked them to do. Give them an opportunity to comply without any further warnings or conversation, and then the consequence. Yep. Now, the trick with the consequence is that they can ramp up, so you have some minor infractions that get treated with relatively small things, but you are able to apply those consequences for 24 hours. So it's not you're going to lose your electronics for a week, not you can't watch Doctor Who for a month, not I'm taking that TV out of your room. Those are too dramatic, too big, and equally, if you say to your child, I'm taking the TV out of your room, that's a bit of a hassle, isn't it? Yeah? That's not something you can do in 2 minutes. So you kind of forget, and it doesn't actually happen, or it happens a week later when everyone's forgotten what it was being taken out for in the first place. Yeah. And if you do take that TV out the room for ever, for a month, whatever it is, he's going to forget what it was it was taken out for. Yeah. 2 days later, it's like, what did you use TV for? Oh, I was naughty. What did you do? Oh, I have no idea, my brother. Must have done more than that. Yeah, but I can't remember what. It was forgotten. Yeah. So taking it out for an extended period of time is of little or no benefit. So those consequences need to be things that can be done for 24 hours, maybe 12 hours, maybe an hour, depending on what it is that your child has done. So that consequence might be you have 2 hours a day on your Xbox. If you do X, you lose half an hour. You do X again, you lose an hour. And you do X again, you lose it for 24 hours. Yep. So you can see how quickly those can ramp up. And it won't take long for you to get the attention of your child when you're talking about an Xbox or PlayStation, and they can see their time just disappearing, going like, whoa, and no, yeah, they're not going to like that. Yeah, most children anyway. So given that situation, you've removed their Xbox, let us say, for them fighting with their brother. Yeah, the brother hasn't been hurt. It was just a normal scrap that siblings do. And you were pretty annoyed about it because they did some damage. They didn't knock a vase over, but they broke a crockery or something. And so they ended up with a consequence. Depending on your view of what they did, you could offer them the opportunity of getting that back a bit sooner. I wouldn't do that straight away, but certainly when everything has calmed down and things are a little bit more sensible, an hour or two later perhaps, you could say, look, fine, there is a way you can get your computer back a bit quicker. Now, instead of not getting it back until tomorrow night, you could get it back for when you're back from school. So you'd be getting it 4 or 5 hours early. But you need to do some stuff for that. So whatever stuff they normally do, no, that's not the stuff they would have to do to earn it back early. They still have to do that stuff. But you might say, look, fine. If you walk Nala, the dog, if you go to the shops for me, and if you do X and Y, then I'll think about giving you it back that bit early. Does that work for you? Yeah. Okay, cool. Is that something you want to do? Yeah. Okay, great. Let's do that then. So you do this, this, and this, extra things, not things that you would have to do normally anyway. You still have to do those things. These are extra things. Great. You can get it back. Happy days. So he sees the value of behaving in the right way, sees the value of helping the family in terms of getting through their day. So he's taking the dog for a walk, means you don't have to. He's going to the shop, means you don't have to. So you can sit and have a cup of tea, or you can play with the sibling, or you can do whatever it is you want to do, because the naughty one has gone and done that stuff. When you're reacting to a broken boundary, I've mentioned this already before, but try not to react emotionally. They're not going to understand that reaction because they're not going to know what your emotions are necessarily. But when you're reacting, if you're acting emotionally, you're going to be more charged and you'll probably be a little bit more fierce than otherwise. Yeah, I'm sure we can all be fierce, but emotionally fierce is just that bit worse. So try not to respond emotionally. Yeah, just bite that tongue and hold yourself back if you can. Don't pass that consequence or the responsibility for that consequence on to somebody else. So don't say, oh, you wait till your dad gets home. No. If you're there, you're the one who needs to deliver the punishment for that broken consequence. So don't pass that on to somebody else. Equally, that's going to paint the father in a dim view because they'll be thinking, I'm frightened of dad. Dad's a disciplinarian. And you get the glory of not telling them off. Not the way it should be. So whoever it is that they're with, when that boundary gets broken, that's the person who should be delivering the consequence. And equally, you and your partner need to agree what those consequences are. So before you've had the conversation with your child about what the consequences are, you want to have had that conversation with him or her, because you want to be making sure that you're both singing off the same hymn sheet. So you don't want something to happen when you're both there and you say, right, you've lost your iPad. And him say, oh, that's a bit harsh. Oh, no, I don't think we should do that, love. No, that would not be the response that you'd want. You'd really want to be saying, you've lost your iPad. You go, yep, you've lost your iPad. Right, a uniform approach. You should be seen as a unified team, you and your partner, by the child. So whatever you said, Dad says. Whatever Dad says, you said. You don't want to give them the opportunity of thinking, Mum's a bit softer than Dad. Yeah, I'll go and chat to Mum, or Dad, whichever it is. Yeah, that's not an opportunity you want to give over to your kids. Be willing to reconsider the rules. There can be occasions when we've made rules with the best of intentions and we just think, maybe I was a bit harsh. Maybe that's a bit tough. Or perhaps it's the other way. It's too easy. They can do that falling off a lot. There's not a lot of point in having that, really. So we just get rid of that as a rule. He does it anyway. Yeah, okay, fine. Get rid of it as a rule. So don't be frightened of going back and adjusting or playing with those rules, but just don't do it a lot. You don't want to say that these rules can all be changed at the drop of a hat whenever you want to, but certainly if there's a consensus between you, then yeah, fine, change them, adjust them, tweak them, but as I say, not loads and loads. You certainly don't want to say, right, those 12 things we made boundaries on, so we scrap those, we're starting again. No, that's not what you want to do. You might say, oh, look, rule 3, it's not really working, is it? It's not working for you, is it, son? No. It's not working for you, is it, Dave? No. Okay, fine. Then perhaps remove it. Yeah. But you certainly don't want to remove all of them. So let's talk some more about the consequences. You've agreed those consequences with your child, you've agreed to ground rules, and remember when you're agreeing those consequences, you've got the advantage because you know what you're doing. Your child is unlikely to know what they're doing. So if you're saying you've got to come off your Xbox by 9 o'clock, okay, fine, they might agree that. Well, do you mean at the weekend as well? No, okay, fine. Is there a time limit attached to that? Is it I can play as much as I like so long as I'm off by 9 o'clock? Okay, no, I can't. Right, fine, I've got 2 hours a day, but not after 9 o'clock. Okay, fine. At the weekends? Different at the weekends? Can I get 4 hours at the weekend maybe? Oh, no, 3. Oh, well, at the moment I can do what I like. So just negotiate what it is that you want. Try and get some idea of what it is you want before you have those conversations. You don't really want to get caught out halfway through agreeing those things. Yeah, just look at those things a bit carefully. Yeah. So you've created these ground rules. You've put all these consequences in place. You've agreed the ground rules with your child. You've agreed the consequences with your child. It's all gone swimmingly, smoothly, and we're fine. Yeah, everything's looking dandy, and we're all set to go. Fine. First day, boundary gets broken, and what happens? You've got to deliver a consequence. So you deliver a consequence, which you pre-agreed with your child, and they go into one. They're having a wobbly. What do you do? Okay. That would be, listen, we agreed this consequence, we agreed this ground rule, we agreed 2 hours was your limit on the computer. You've now had 2 hours and 10 minutes. That's 10 minutes more than you should have had because I've been really relatively lax about it, and that's fine. But there's no way you can have more than 2 hours and 10 minutes. You've still not come off, so therefore you've lost the computer for tomorrow. What is it that's making you angry? And they're still going into one. Yeah, okay. That would be a time to ramp it up in as much as, look, if you continue to behave in this way, you'll lose it for more than 24 hours, which I don't want to do. I don't want to do that. Is that what you want me to do? No? Okay, then you need to come off. And eventually they come off. What you've done there is that you've put the decision firmly in their mind that if they continue, it'll be down to them. Yeah. You're saying, I don't want to do this. I can, because I'm the parent, but I don't want to do this. I don't want you to lose the computer for 2 days. I really don't. But that's what's going to happen unless you come off the computer now. So come off now. Great, done. Good news. Okay. So let's just talk about anger for a moment, because anger is probably, well, anger and anxiety are probably making up at the moment 80% of my clients, I would say. So 40% anger, 40% anxiety, and 20% odds and sods and bits. So anger is a big feature with regards to what's going on in households. Let me just see what questions we have. How would you deal with them telling you that their friends are allowed to do X, Y, and Z, and it's not fair? I would ask them where their friends live. They would tell me that their friends live in their house with their parents. And I'd say, yeah, get the nail on the head. And they no doubt have rules that you don't have. And you know, you get X and Y and Z as treats and as things that we go and do, and we go places and we do this. I have no idea whether they do or not, but maybe they don't get those things. So we have rules in our house because it's our house, and they have rules in their house because it's their house. So their rules may be different to ours. Our rules may be different to theirs. But whatever our rules are, those are the rules that apply to you. So I hope that helps, Paula. So let's go back to the anger for a moment. So as I say, about 40% of my clients are angry. They're angry kids. And one of the first things I talk to the parents about is how they respond to that anger. Do they give in? Do they scold their child? Do they send their child to their room? You know, exactly what do they do when the child is angry? And I hear all sorts of things. So the one thing that I frown upon is the child being sent to their room. That's a complete no, don't do that. If you're sending an angry child to their room, you're telling them, I can't cope with this, I don't know what to do. You go to your bedroom, you sort it out. That's not what you want to be doing. That's going to create a lonely child and a child who's really, really not going to be happy. So don't send a child to their room for anything. Excuse me, put my voice back in. Yes, don't send a child to their room for anything. It's not really what you want to do. So the one thing I would always do with these parents is I will give them a form that's called Help Me Calm Down. I'll sort of wave this in front of camera now to get an idea of the sort of form that it is. And this form is something that they then complete with their child. And you'll sit down with the child at a time when they're not angry. It may be that they were angry yesterday, which is fine, but you're discussing it today and you suggest, let's sit down and complete this form together, because I would like to help you with your anger. I would like to know what it feels like for you when you're angry, and I would like to be there to support you. And that's very much the picture you want to give, is that you're there to help them and support them. So you work your way through this form, asking them these questions. The first of which is, so when you're angry, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to hug you or put my arm around you? Yeah, I would actually, Mum. Okay, great. Tick the box. Fine. So would you like me just to not talk and just listen? I like it when you talk to me. Okay, so that's a no. Yeah. Would you like me to remind you about the consequences? No, I don't. No. Okay. Would you like me to tell you something funny? You never know they're funny, Mum. No. Okay. Would you like me to try and distract you? Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, that'd work for me, Mum. Tick. And you go through these questions and you'll end up with a whole load of yes, no's, or sometimes. When you get to the end of the form, it's very important to ask your child, can you think of anything else that I could do that might help you? Because there may be something, this is a fairly comprehensive list, but there may be something that actually he's crying out for you to do that's not amongst that list. So very much ask your child, is there anything else you can think of that I could do that's going to help you when you're feeling angry? Yeah, there is actually, Mum. Can you do this? Great. Get it written down. Yeah, okay. And go back through the form, discuss what the answers are and agree that we've got it about right. And then the next time your child is angry, you want to be working towards that list. So you want it pinned up on the fridge or somewhere nearby so that you can refer to it. And to be fair, you'll probably find that the first time won't be that effective. Because remember, he's answered these questions when he's nice and calm. And we're now doing it for real when he's real angry. Yeah, okay, so some of these things might not work. Give it another day, discuss the anger the following day. Let's just talk through this form again. I'm not sure that everything on it worked. Do you? No. Okay, great. So let's talk about some of the stuff on the form. Go back through and address those questions all over it again. And you'll end up with some slight variations, slight differences in terms of what you've got. Most parents that have used this have told me twice has been enough to go through the form, but you may find it's 3 or 4 times that you need to go through the form before you end up with a proper good working example. So you've got your form. They now know you're there to support them when they're angry. They feel a bit more comfortable. They're not being scolded or told off for being angry. They're actually being supported through that anger. And I've had some parents tell me that just them understanding that has been sufficient for the anger to almost disappear. Great, that's really good news. So they're feeling supported. They are getting to know that, yes, you're there to help them in that angry place. And that just feels a whole lot better. Yeah, okay. So if you want a copy of that form, just let me know or send me an email, iandavis36@btinternet.com. Send me an email and I'll get that form sent off to you. It's not mine, by the way. I finished that off with somebody else, so I can't claim painful head. Yeah. The other thing that's pretty good is this one, which is Your Words Matter. So this talks about the way that you talk to your child. And on its own, again, I've had parents tell me that this can make a substantial difference. So this is all about the language that we use and the thoughts and ideas and processes that it encourages the child to respond with. So instead of saying, be quiet, you could try, can you use a softer voice? Well, that causes them to stop and consider and think, could I use a softer voice? And either they're just going to pause and stop using that loud voice, or they may even just think, oh, yeah, I can. Yeah, fine. Yeah. So another one is, do you need help? Well, that's a fairly direct yes/no question. And ideally, that's not what you want. So if you ask them instead, I'm here to help. If you need me, just let me know. That gives them the option of coming to you when they reach the point where they need your help, which may be now, maybe later. But they know that you're there to help. they know that they can ask you anything that they wish. Good news. This is one of my favourite ones. So you've got two siblings, they're having a scrap. You walk in the room, you say, do I need to separate you? Okay, fine, that's not great. Yeah. But instead, if you say, hey, could you guys use a break? That just creates a different state of mind, doesn't it? Yeah. Could you guys use a break? Yeah, actually I could. Yeah. So that's a great one to use. Yeah. Do you have any questions? Instead, what questions do you have? Again, it creates a very different response from the child. Yeah. So again, if you want that document, email me iandavis36@btinternet.com, and I'll be happy to send it to you. Not a problem at all. I don't think my colleagues at NLP for Kids can attach those to this video, so I'm afraid you'll have to email me and we'll find out from there. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'm almost done. I'm almost about ready to wrap up. We've done the ground rules. We've done the discipline through the anger and stuff. Is there anything that anybody would like to know that I've not discussed yet? Any questions from anybody? No? Okay, fine. So in that case, I am going to wrap up. Hopefully you've enjoyed what I've had to say. Certainly I've enjoyed presenting to you, so thank you very much. You can catch more of these sessions. They're out there on YouTube. You'll be able to catch this on YouTube in a couple of days' time if you want to. And there are more sessions during the course of this week and next, all the way through to the 31st of March. You'll see all the stuff on social media, so there's plenty there to go and look at. So without further ado, I will say thank you very much for being with me and good night. Have a great week. Cheerio. Bye-bye.